My name is Araceli, and at 68 years old, life has taught me plenty of lessons. Since Thomas passed away 5 years ago, I thought my biggest challenges were behind me. That was until last month when my daughter-in-law Tara looked at my freshly applied lipstick and sneered, "Don't bother. At your age, makeup can't work miracles anymore." I said nothing, just grabbed my purse and walked out. What happened the next day changed everything between us. Before I continue my story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories about standing up for yourself no matter your age. I spent 40 years teaching English literature at Roosevelt High School in Seattle. The classroom was my sanctuary, a place where I felt purposeful and alive. I loved watching my students discover the power of words, the magic of storytelling. 3 years ago, I finally retired, though not entirely by choice. The administration was pushing for younger teachers, and I felt the subtle pressure to make way for the next generation. Retirement might have been manageable if Thomas had still been with me. My husband of 45 years suffered a massive heart attack while working in our garden on a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning. One moment he was pruning the roses he loved so much, telling me about his plans to expand the vegetable patch that spring. The next moment he was gone. The doctors said it was quick, that he likely felt little pain. That was supposed to comfort me, I think. It did not. After Thomas died, my world narrowed significantly. I had our home, my books, and my son James. At 42, James has become everything a mother could hope for. He works as a senior software engineer at one of those big tech companies downtown. Smart as a whip, just like his father, but with my love of literature. Even with his demanding job, he always made time for weekly dinners and regular phone calls. He was my rock during that first devastating year without Thomas. It was at one of his company events that I met Tara. She worked in the marketing department, all stylish confidence and ambitious energy. I remember thinking how beautiful she was with her sleek dark hair and impeccable fashion sense. She was 38 then, almost 2 decades younger than James, but they seemed well matched in intelligence and drive. "Mom, this is Tara," James had said, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Tara, this is my mother, Araceli." "It's so wonderful to finally meet you," Tara had gushed, taking both my hands in hers. "James talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you." Those early days were promising. Tara included me in their wedding plans, asking my opinion on venues and flowers. She called me for Thomas family recipes and listened to stories about James' childhood with apparent fascination. The wedding was beautiful, intimate, but elegant, just as they wanted. I shed happy tears watching my son begin this new chapter, grateful that he had found someone who seemed to truly care for him. The first 2 years of their marriage, our relationship was cordial, even warm at times. Sunday dinners became our tradition. Sometimes Tara would ask my advice about managing difficult colleagues or dealing with family holidays. I was careful not to overstep, remembering my own challenges with Thomas' mother years ago. The shift happened gradually, so subtly at first, that I questioned if I was imagining things. It seemed to coincide with Tara's promotion to marketing director. With her new position came a new circle of friends, colleagues, who lived in the expensive neighborhoods and vacationed in exotic locations. Their lifestyle upgraded accordingly: a larger house in Queen Anne, luxury cars, exclusive restaurants. The first real incident I remember clearly was at a dinner in their new home. I had brought a houseplant as a small housewarming gift. "Oh, how quaint," Tara had said, barely glancing at the peace lily I had carefully selected. "We actually have an interior designer who selects our decor, but thank you for the thought." She placed the plant in a back hallway, where it would later die from lack of light, I discovered on a subsequent visit. After that, the criticisms became more frequent. My clothes were dated, my opinions out of touch with modern reality. When I offered to help in the kitchen, Tara would sigh dramatically and say, "It's probably easier if I just do it myself, rather than having to explain everything." James noticed none of this, or perhaps chose not to. When Tara would make a cutting remark, he would change the subject, or suddenly remember an email he needed to send. The few times I gently mentioned the tension to him, he brushed it off. "Tara is just direct, Mom. It's the corporate world she comes from. Don't take it personally." But it was personal, increasingly so. I began to feel like an obligation rather than family. The Sunday dinners became less frequent with last-minute cancellations that James would deliver apologetically over the phone. "Tara has a work emergency," or "we're both just exhausted from the week." I tried to be understanding. I recalled the stresses of early career and marriage. I made excuses for both of them in my mind, focusing on maintaining peace whenever we did get together. I brought gifts they would appreciate, asked about their interests, kept my opinions neutral. I became smaller, quieter, more accommodating with each visit. Even with my efforts, I felt the growing distance between myself and my only son. Our once easy conversations became stilted and brief. I missed him terribly but didn't know how to bridge the gap without seeming needy or creating tension with Tara. The loneliness of widowhood deepened, taking on a new dimension as I felt my only family slipping away. I decided that if family life was going to be a source of pain, I needed to build a fuller life elsewhere. Retirement didn't have to mean isolation. Thomas wouldn't have wanted me to wither away in grief and loneliness. With that in mind, I began volunteering twice a week at our local library, helping with their literacy program for adults learning English. The gratitude in my students' eyes when they mastered a difficult passage reminded me of my teaching days and gave me a sense of purpose. I also maintained a weekly book club with my 3 closest friends, Susan, Elaine, and Dorothy. We had known each other since our 20s, supporting one another through marriages, child-rearing career challenges, and now widowhood. Dorothy and Elaine had lost their husbands too, while Susan was recently divorced after 40 years of marriage. They knew me well enough to notice the changes. "You're quieter these days," Susan observed during one of our meetings. "And you've lost weight. Is everything all right?" I hadn't planned to burden them with my family problems, but the genuine concern in her eyes broke something loose in me. Before I knew it, I was sharing the whole situation, the subtle put-downs, the growing isolation, James' apparent blindness to it all. "She sounds like a classic bully," Dorothy, always the straightforward one, declared. "And she's targeted you because you're an easy mark right now. No offense, Araceli, but you've been vulnerable since Thomas passed." "But what can I do?" I asked. She's James' wife. "If I make an issue of it, he'll have to choose sides. I can't put him in that position." "So instead you're disappearing?" Elaine asked gently. "I've noticed it too. You second-guess everything you say now. The Araceli I know has never been afraid to speak her mind." They were right. I had always been confident in who I was. Thomas had loved my independent spirit, my willingness to stand up for what I believed. When had I become this shadow afraid of causing waves? The situation came to a head at Thanksgiving. I had offered to host as I had done throughout James' childhood and early adulthood. To my surprise, Tara accepted, though she had several suggestions about the menu. "People are so much more health-conscious now," she told me over the phone. "Maybe we could do quinoa stuffing instead of the traditional bread one. And is it possible to make the pumpkin pie with a sugar alternative?" I agreed, spending hours researching recipes that might please her while still honoring some traditions. I cleaned the house top to bottom, set the table with my best china, and prepared everything according to her preferences. When they arrived, Tara walked through my home with the air of an inspector running her finger along surfaces as if checking for dust. Her parents had declined to join us, opting instead for a luxury Thanksgiving cruise. James carried in an expensive bottle of wine and gave me a quick hug, looking tired and slightly tense. The dinner started pleasantly enough with James reminiscing about Thanksgivings of his childhood. But when I brought out the turkey perfectly cooked as Thomas had taught me years ago, Tara took one small bite and frowned. "It's a bit dry, isn't it?" she said, reaching for her water glass. "Maybe next year we should consider catering. There's this amazing service my boss uses. It would take the pressure off you, Araceli." James coughed uncomfortably. "The turkey is great, Mom. Tara, honey, pass the cranberry sauce, would you?" His attempt to change the subject only highlighted his unwillingness to defend me. I felt a sharp pain in my chest as I realized how much our relationship had changed. The son who once proudly proclaimed my cooking the best in the world now couldn't even directly contradict his wife's rudeness. That night, after they left with barely half the leftover containers I had prepared, we're watching our carbs. Tara had explained the chest pain returned more intense and frightening. I drove myself to the emergency room, not wanting to bother James and Tara with my problems. After several tests, the doctor told me it was likely anxiety-induced chest pain, not a heart attack as I had feared. "Your physical heart is strong," she said kindly, "but it seems like you're under significant stress. Is there something going on in your life that might be causing this level of anxiety?" I burst into tears, the emotions I'd been suppressing for months pouring out. The doctor listened patiently, then wrote me a prescription for mild anti-anxiety medication and the name of a therapist. "Stress can cause real physical symptoms," she explained. "And at your age, it's important to address these issues before they affect your overall health. Promise me you'll call the therapist." I did call, though I only attended 2 sessions. The therapist suggested boundaries and direct communication, but the thought of confronting Tara and potentially losing my already tenuous connection with James terrified me. Instead, I focused on building my own support system and finding joy outside of family obligations. My friends noticed when I began canceling our regular gatherings. After the 3rd missed book club, they showed up at my door unannounced, armed with coffee and concerned expressions. "You can't isolate yourself," Dorothy insisted, setting down a bag of fresh pastries on my kitchen counter. "We've been friends for 40 years. Whatever is happening, we face it together." Their intervention was the wake-up call I needed. I had lost 10 pounds, was sleeping poorly, and had stopped doing many things I enjoyed. With their encouragement, I began to expand my world again, joining a senior center art class and a walking group. I even signed up for a cooking class, specializing in international cuisine, something I'd always wanted to try. When I mentioned these activities to Tara during one of our increasingly rare family dinners, she smiled thinly. "How nice that there are age-appropriate activities for seniors now. So important to stay active as you get older." Her condescension stung, but I chose not to engage. Inside, though, a small spark of my old self was reigniting. The woman who had commanded classrooms of teenagers for decades, who had marched for equal rights in the 60s, who had raised a son as a working mother, when that was still frowned upon, she was still inside me. Diminished perhaps, but not gone. I began to question whether keeping the peace was worth the cost to my dignity and self-respect. Was I really helping James by allowing his wife to treat me this way? What example was I setting by accepting disrespect as the price of family connection? These questions churned inside me, building toward a moment of truth I couldn't yet imagine, but was inevitably approaching. James' 42nd birthday arrived on a crisp autumn evening. He had invited us to celebrate at Canlis, one of Seattle's most upscale restaurants with sweeping views of Lake Union. Under normal circumstances, I would have been thrilled both by the invitation and the chance to dine at such a prestigious venue. Instead, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety forming as I prepared for the evening. What would Tara find fault with tonight? My clothes, my conversation. The gift I had carefully selected, a first edition of Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse, 5 James' favorite novel since high school. I spent the entire day getting ready, not out of excitement, but from fear of criticism. I drove to the Northgate Mall and splurged on a new dress, a simple but elegant blue sheath that reminded me of one Thomas had always loved. The saleswoman assured me it was contemporary without trying too hard, which seemed like exactly what I needed. Back home, I took extra care with my appearance. I set my silver-streaked dark hair in loose waves the way Thomas had preferred it. From the back of my dresser drawer, I retrieved a special occasion lipstick in a soft berry shade, one I hadn't worn since Thomas' funeral. The gold tube was expensive, a gift from James several Christmases ago. Standing before my full-length mirror, I felt a momentary satisfaction. The woman looking back at me was older. Yes, with lines earned from decades of laughter and tears, but still recognizably me. Still Araceli, who once turned heads when she entered a room who Thomas had gazed at with admiration until his final days. "You look nice," I told my reflection, trying to bolster my confidence. "You are worthy of respect." I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, a habit from my teaching days. The maitre d' seated me at a window table already set for 3, offering me a glass of wine while I waited. The restaurant glowed with understated elegance, amber lighting, pristine white tablecloths, discreet service. I sipped my wine and watched boats glide across the darkening water, allowing myself to hope for a pleasant evening. James arrived first, rushing in with apologies about traffic and a warm hug that momentarily dissolved my anxiety. He looked so handsome in his charcoal suit, so much like his father at that age. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, taking the seat beside me. "That color has always suited you." His simple compliment nearly brought tears to my eyes. How long had it been since someone in my family had said something kind about my appearance? Tara arrived 15 minutes later, immaculate in a designer dress I recognized from a magazine, her entrance, drawing appreciative glances from nearby diners. She air-kissed my cheek, careful not to make actual contact before sliding gracefully into her seat. Traffic was a nightmare, she announced, though she had clearly had time for perfect makeup and not a hair out of place. "I swear this city gets worse every year." The early conversation was surprisingly pleasant. James talked about a new project at work that excited him, his eyes lighting up as he explained technical details neither Tara nor I fully understood. I was content just to watch him, to see glimpses of the enthusiastic boy he had once been. The trouble began when James excused himself to greet some colleagues. Wad spotted him from across the restaurant. As soon as he was out of earshot, Tara's demeanor changed. She gave me a critical once over, her gaze lingering on my face. "Is that a new lipstick?" she asked, her voice carrying that particular tone I had come to dread, sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. "Yes," I answered, resisting the urge to wipe it away under her scrutiny. "I thought it would be nice to dress up for James' birthday." Tara sipped her wine, watching me over the rim of her glass. Then came the words that would change everything between us. "Don't bother with that lipstick. At your age, makeup can't work miracles anymore." The casual cruelty of her statement took my breath away. In an instant, I was transported back to my insecure teenage years, to every moment of self-doubt I had ever experienced. But worse than the insult itself was the realization that this woman, who should have been family, took actual pleasure in hurting me. I could see it in her satisfied expression, the slight curve of her lips, as she registered the impact of her words. This wasn't thoughtlessness, it was deliberate. In my mind, I heard Thomas' voice, a memory from decades ago. "You are beautiful, Araceli. Not just your face, but your heart, your mind, your spirit. Never let anyone tell you different." I became aware that other diners had overheard Tara's comment. An older couple at the next table exchanged glances. The woman looked at me with sympathy, and somehow, that silent compassion from a stranger broke something loose inside me. I could stay and endure more of this treatment. I could pretend I hadn't heard, or that the words didn't cut deeply. I could maintain the peace, at the expense of my dignity, as I had done so many times before. Or I could leave. With a calm I did not feel, I gathered my purse and the wrapped gift for James. "Please tell James I wasn't feeling well," I said, placing the package beside his plate. "I hope he enjoys his birthday." "You're leaving?" Tara asked, seeming genuinely surprised. "Don't be so sensitive. It was just an observation." But I was already walking away, my heart pounding. I nodded to the sympathetic couple as I passed their table, the woman giving me an encouraging smile. The maitre d' called a taxi for me, and I waited outside in the cool evening air, breathing deeply to hold back tears. The drive home passed in a blur. Once inside my empty house, the tears came freely, ruining the makeup I had applied so carefully. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, mascara streaking down my cheeks, lipstick smudged. For a moment, I saw what Tara saw, an aging woman trying too hard, pathetic in her efforts to hold on to fading beauty. Then I straightened my shoulders and wiped my face. No, I would not accept her vision of me. James called an hour later, his voice concerned. "Mom, what happened? Are you sick?" "Just a headache," I lied, unable to tell him the truth, still protecting him as I had done since he was small. "I didn't want to ruin your birthday. Did you like the book?" "I loved it. It's perfect. But dinner wasn't the same without you." After we hung up, I pulled out old photo albums. Thomas and me on our wedding day. holding newborn James, family vacations, my retirement party. A lifetime of memories in which I had been loved, respected, valued. When had I become someone who accepted dismissive treatment? When had keeping peace become more important than keeping my self-respect? As I fell into troubled sleep that night, one question echoed in my mind: what would happen if I stopped accepting the unacceptable? I woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The hurt remained a dull ache beneath my breastbone, but something else had awakened too: a determination, a spark of the woman I used to be before grief and isolation had diminished me. My first call was to Dorothy. Unlike Elaine, who would sympathize, or Susan, who would analyze, Dorothy would give me the unvarnished truth I needed. "Can we meet for coffee?" I asked when she answered. "Something happened last night." "I'll be at Lighthouse Coffee in 20 minutes, she responded, no questions asked. This is why we've been friends for 4 decades. The local cafe was quiet on a weekday morning. Dorothy was already waiting with 2 steaming mugs and concerned eyes when I arrived. One look at my face told her this wasn't a minor issue. "What did that woman do now?" she asked as I slid into the booth across from her. The whole story spilled out: the new dress, the birthday dinner, terrace cutting, remark my quiet exit. To my embarrassment, tears threatened again, as I repeated the words that had so deeply wounded me. Dorothy listened without interruption, her expression growing stormier by the minute. When I finished, she reached across the table and gripped my hand. "Enough," she said firmly. "This has gone on long enough, Araceli. That woman has been systematically undermining you for years, and you've let her because you don't want to cause problems for James. But ask yourself this: what kind of son lets his mother be treated this way?" Hez caught in the middle, I defended automatically. "Hez, a grown man who is allowing his wife to bully his mother," Dorothy countered. "And you're enabling it by never standing up for yourself. What would you tell one of your students if they were being treated this way? What would you tell me?" She was right, and we both knew it. I would never advise anyone I cared about to accept such treatment, no matter the relationship. "I'm not saying you need to create a family drama," Dorothy continued more gently, "but it's time to remember who you are. You're Araceli Martinez, the woman who marched on Washington for equal rights, who raised a son alone for 3 years, while Thomas was deployed, who commanded respect from hundreds of teenagers every day for 40 years. Where is that woman?" "She's still here," I whispered, "just buried." Dorothy nodded, then a slow smile spread across her face. "You know who's back in town, Harold Friedman?" The name hit me like an electric shock. Harold had been my college boyfriend before I met Thomas. Brilliant kind with a dry wit that had made me laugh even during finals week. Harold. After all these years. "His wife passed away 2 years ago," Cancer Dorothy explained. "Hez moved back to Seattle to be near his daughter. I ran into him at the farmer's market last weekend. He asked about you." A complicated mix of emotions washed over me: memories of young love, the awkwardness of reconnecting after so many decades, curiosity about the man he had become. "Hez, a retired university dean now," Dorothy continued. "Still writes books on economic theory. Distinguished-looking silver fox type, if you know what I mean." Despite everything, I felt a blush rising to my cheeks. "Dorothy Winters? Are you trying to set me up?" "I'm trying to remind you that you're still very much alive, Araceli, and that there are people who would appreciate that beautiful heart of yours, lipstick or no lipstick." 2 days later, I found myself nervously entering the Elliott Bay Book Company, where Dorothy had arranged a coincidental meeting. I spotted him immediately browsing in the history section, taller than I remembered but unmistakably Harold. Silver hair. Instead of the dark curls I recalled, reading glasses perched on his nose, but the same thoughtful expression as he examined a book. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Would you happen to know anything about economic theory? I'm completely lost in this section." He looked up, confusion giving way to recognition, then delight. Araceli Martinez. Still using the same pickup lines after all these years. We laughed, and just like that, 45 years melted away. We settled in the cafe's corner with coffee, talking as easily as we had in college. He told me about his wife Rachel, their life in Boston, her long illness. I shared stories of Thomas, my teaching career, James. "You've hardly changed," he said at one point, his eyes warm with genuine appreciation. "Now who's using old lines?" I teased. "I have plenty of gray hair and wrinkles to prove otherwise." "I mean your essence," Harold clarified. "That spark in your eyes when you talk about books you love. The way you listen, like every word matters. Those things haven't changed at all." For 3 hours we talked, jumping from books to travel to memories to politics. Not once did I feel judged or diminished. Not once did I carefully filter my words for fear of criticism. I had forgotten how it felt to be simply accepted, to be seen as a whole person, worthy of interest and respect. As we prepared to leave, Harold mentioned a university fundraising gala the following weekend. "I'm being given some award for lifetime achievement," he said, with characteristic modesty. "Probably just because I donated to their new library, but I would be honored if you'd accompany me." My immediate instinct was to decline. What would Tara say? If she knew I was attending a formal event with another man, what would James think? Then I caught myself. Why was my first thought about their approval? I was a widow of 5 years, not a child needing permission. "I'd love to," I heard myself say, "though I don't have anything suitable to wear to such a formal event." "You could wear a paper bag and still outshine everyone there," Harold said, with the easy confidence of a man secure in his own worth. "But if shopping would make you feel more comfortable, I know there's still a week to find something." After we parted with a promise to speak the next day, I called Dorothy. "I need your help finding a gala-appropriate dress," I told her. "And possibly a refresher course in how to socialize with humans who don't criticize my every move." Dorothy's delighted laugh warmed my heart. Now there's the Araceli I know and love. "Pick me up tomorrow at 10. We have work to do." The next week was a whirlwind of preparations. Dorothy and I spent a day at the downtown shopping district, eventually finding a deep burgundy gown that even the 20-something salesgirl declared absolutely stunning on you. I splurged on proper undergarments, comfortable but elegant shoes, and a small crystal evening bag. The day before the gala, Dorothy accompanied me to an upscale salon, where I had my hair styled and received a professional makeup application, the first since my wedding day. The stylist, an artistic young man with tattoos and boundless enthusiasm, took one look at me and declared, "Honey, those cheekbones are wasted on someone half your age. We're going to make you glow." 2 hours later, looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked younger, I didn't, nor did I wish to, but because I looked like the best version of myself. Confident, elegant, worthy. "Thomas would be so proud of you," Dorothy said quietly as we left the salon. "Not because of how you look, though, you do look magnificent. But because you're reclaiming yourself." That night I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, practicing walking in my heels, rehearsing small talk, trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. It had been so long since I'd looked forward to an evening out, since I'd felt the pleasant anticipation of being admired. Whether anything came of this reconnection with Harold or not, I was grateful for the reminder that I was still fully alive, still capable of joy and connection. More importantly, I was beginning to understand that my value didn't lie in Tara's approval or even in James' constant presence in my life. It lay in my own self-worth, in the connections I chose to nurture, in the joy I allowed myself to experience. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, I decided. Not just a date with an old flame, but the first day of reclaiming my power, my voice, my right to be treated with dignity. Little did I know just how dramatic that new beginning would be. The morning of the gala, I awoke, with butterflies in my stomach, a sensation I hadn't experienced in decades. I spent the day in careful preparation, bathing with scented oils moisturizing my skin, resting with cucumber slices on my eyes as Dorothy had insisted. "Trust me," Shed said. "It's old school, but it works." At 3 o'clock, I began the process of getting ready, taking care with each step, just as the salon professionals had demonstrated. I pinned my hair up in a soft, sophisticated style, applied makeup with a light hand that enhanced rather than masked, and finally stepped into the burgundy gown. The woman in the mirror looked elegant, poised, confident, in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not young, but vibrant, not trying to hide my age but embracing the beauty that comes with decades of living fully. I was fastening my mother's pearl earrings, the something old, to balance all this newness, when my phone chimed with a text from James. "Hey Mom, I need to drop off those insurance papers for you to sign. Tara and I can stop by around 5 if that's okay, should only take a minute." My heart rate immediately accelerated. Harold was scheduled to pick me up at 6. If James and Tara came at 5, they'd surely notice my formal attire and ask questions. Part of me wanted to make an excuse to avoid their visit and the potential awkwardness. But another part, stronger, more assertive, recognized this as an opportunity. Why shouldn't they know I had plans? Why should I hide my social life as if it were something shameful? 5 works fine, I texted back. See you then. The next hour passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. I laid out the insurance documents James had emailed earlier for review, made sure the house was presentable, and tried to calm my nerves with deep breathing exercises. At precisely 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. James and Tara stood on my porch, both in casual weekend wear. James' expression shifted to surprise as he took in my appearance. "Wow, Mom, you look amazing," he said, giving me a careful hug to avoid disturbing my outfit. "What's the occasion?" Before I could answer, Tara stepped into the hallway, her eyes widening as she assessed me from head to toe. I saw the familiar flicker of criticism forming the slight narrowing of her gaze that usually preceded a cutting remark. "My goodness, Araceli," she said with manufactured brightness. "You're certainly dressed up. Senior center, having a formal night." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable, but instead of shrinking as I usually did, I felt a calm settle over me. Her words couldn't diminish me unless I gave them power. "The papers are in the living room," I said to James, ignoring Tara's comment entirely. "Would either of you like some tea while we go through them?" James followed me, but Tara lingered, examining the hallway, as if searching for clues. "Seriously, where could you possibly be going, dressed like that?" she pressed. "Some charity thing at the church?" I smiled pleasantly. "Just an evening out." Her expression sharpened with interest. "With the book club ladies. In that dress." "The papers look straightforward." James interrupted, either oblivious to the tension or deliberately changing the subject. "It's just updating beneficiary information since they changed their policies." As I reviewed where to sign, I felt Tara's continued scrutiny. Her curiosity was clearly eating at her, but I maintained my composure, enjoying this small shift in our usual dynamic. For once I held information she wanted, and I had no obligation to share it. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell chimed again. My pulse jumped. Harold was nothing if not punctual. "Are you expecting someone?" James asked, looking up from the papers. "Yes, actually. My date for the evening." The word date hung in the air. James blinked in surprise, while Tara actually took a step back, as if recalibrating everything she thought she knew about me. "I'll get the door," I said, standing and smoothing my dress. "We're just about finished with these, aren't we?" I walked to the door with my head high, aware of them, following behind curiosity overriding discretion. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Harold stood on my porch, impressively handsome, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. At 70, he carried himself with the confident posture of a man comfortable in his skin. Silver hair, neatly styled, subtle cologne detectable as he leaned in to kiss my cheek, and in his hands a small bouquet of deep red roses. "Araceli?" he said warmly, his eyes appreciating me in a way that made me stand taller. "You look absolutely breathtaking." "Thank you, Harold. You look quite handsome yourself." I accepted the flowers, then turned to make introductions. "This is my son James and his wife Tara. James, Tara, this is Dr. Harold Friedman, an old friend." "Dr. Tara," echoed, her expression shifting. Harold extended his hand to James. "A pleasure to meet you. You're the software engineer, correct? Araceli speaks so highly of your work." James shook his hand, looking slightly dazed. "Yes, that's right. Nice to meet you too, Dr. Friedman. Please call me Harold. Doctor is just an academic title that makes students feel they need to take my economic theories seriously." His warm laugh filled the hallway. "Though I suppose I should use it tonight given the university politics at these events." "Economic theories?" Tara stepped forward, sudden interest animating her features. Are you Harold Friedman, who wrote Market Dynamics in Transitional Economies? Guilty as charged, Harold replied modestly. Though that was 2 decades ago. My recent work focuses more on sustainable development models. Are you in the field? I'm a marketing director at Transglobal Tech. Your book is required reading in our executive training program. The color had drained from Tara's face as she made the connection, recognizing not just any man, but someone with significant standing in her professional world. Is it really? How flattering. Though probably outdated by now, Harold said graciously before turning back to me. The car is waiting, Araceli. Shall we? The president of the university is hosting a small reception before the main event. I nodded, collecting my wrap and evening bag from the hall table. I'll be out in just a minute. Harold stepped outside, giving me a moment with James and Tara. James recovered first, giving me a quick hug. Have a great time, Mom. You really do look beautiful. Thank you, sweetheart. I turned to Tara, whose expression remained frozen, somewhere between shock and calculation. Don't wait up, I added with a small smile. As I took Harold's arm and walked to the sleek Blacktown car waiting at the curb, I caught a glimpse of Tara, still standing in the doorway, watching us with an expression I'd never seen before, one of genuine speechlessness. Harold opened the car door for me, his manners impeccable as always. As we pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one small backward glance. My daughter-in-law remained motionless in the doorway, the woman who'd dismissed my lipstick as futile, now witnessing me drive away with a distinguished man who clearly saw me very differently than she did. Your son seems like a good man, Harold commented as we drove toward the university, though his wife appeared rather surprised by my existence. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Harold, you have no idea. The university gala exceeded every expectation. The grand ballroom was transformed with tasteful decorations, ambient lighting, and tables elegantly set with fine china and crystal. A small orchestra played from a corner stage, their classical selections, providing a sophisticated backdrop to the conversations filling the room. As Harold's guest, I found myself introduced to university regents, department heads, and major donors. What surprised me most was Harold's obvious pride as he presented me. This is Araceli Martinez, he would say. Retired educator, published poet, and the woman who first introduced me to Gabriel Garcia Marquez back when we were undergraduates. No qualifications about me being just anything, no apologetic explanations. In his eyes and words, I was someone of value with accomplishments and interests worth mentioning. The university's president, a distinguished woman in her 60s, greeted me warmly. Harold speaks so highly of you, she said. He mentioned you taught high school literature for many years. We need more educators with that level of dedication. My daughter had a teacher who changed her life that way. I found myself engaged in substantive conversations about education policy, current literature, and the changing nature of Seattle neighborhoods. Not once did I feel overlooked or patronized. When I spoke, people listened not out of politeness but with genuine interest. After dinner came the awards ceremony. Harold received his recognition for contributions to the economics department, with characteristic humility and humor, acknowledging colleagues and expressing gratitude rather than dwelling on his own accomplishments. Watching him from our table, I felt a surge of admiration for the man had become. The boy I'd known in college had grown into someone of substance and generosity. When he returned to our table, the orchestra began playing again, this time selections better suited for dancing. Harold extended his hand to me. Would you do me the honor, Araceli? It had been years since I'd danced. My last dance had been with Thomas at our 40th anniversary celebration. For a moment I hesitated, wondering if my skills had abandoned me, but Harold's patient smile gave me courage. On the dance floor, his lead was confident but gentle. We moved together as if the decades apart had never happened, my body remembering steps I thought forgotten. Other couples joined us, but in that moment, it felt like we were the only 2 people in the room. Do you know, Harold said quietly, as we moved to the music, that every man in this room has noticed how beautiful you are tonight. I laughed softly. That's very gallant of you, but hardly accurate. It's entirely accurate, he insisted. though not nearly as important as the fact that you look happy. That's the most beautiful thing about you tonight, your joy. The event photographer approached, asking if he could take our picture for the university alumni magazine. Harold looked to me for permission before agreeing. We posed together, his arm lightly around my waist, both of us smiling naturally. "Would it be all right if I posted one of these on social media?" Harold asked afterward. "My daughter is always telling me I need to engage more with the modern world." I nodded, not thinking much of it at the time. How significant could one photo be? The evening continued with more dancing conversation, and a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in far too long. When Harold finally drove me home, it was well past midnight. He walked me to my door like the gentleman he was. "I had a wonderful time," I told him, honestly. "As did I." He hesitated, then added, "I'd very much like to see you again, Araceli. Perhaps dinner next weekend." The flutter in my chest reminded me of being 18 again. I'd like that very much. His goodnight kiss was brief but tender, a promise of possibilities rather than a demand. As I watched his car drive away, I realized I was smiling so widely my cheeks hurt. Inside, I removed my jewelry and gown, carefully still floating on the evening's magic. Before going to bed, I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from James and numerous notifications. Apparently, the university had posted photos from the event on their social media accounts tagging Harold. Among them was a beautiful shot of us dancing, my face alight with happiness, his gaze focused entirely on me. The photo had already garnered dozens of comments, many from former students who had recognized me. Miss Martinez looking gorgeous. Best English teacher ever, still inspiring us. Whoa, Miss M has moves. The outpouring of affection from young people I'd taught years ago brought tears to my eyes. They'd remembered me, valued what I'd given them. Among the notifications was a text from Tara, sent just 20 minutes earlier. "You looked amazing in that gown, Araceli. The color was perfect with your complexion. James and I would love to have you for dinner on Sunday if you're free." I stared at the message, its abrupt change in tone so transparent it was almost comical. 5 years of subtle, and not so subtle put-downs. And suddenly, I'm being complimented because photographs with a respected academic were circulating in her professional sphere. The next morning, my phone rang while I was still having coffee. It was Harold calling to thank me again for accompanying him and to confirm our dinner plans. We chatted easily, making plans to visit a new exhibition at the art museum before our restaurant reservation. After we hung up, another call came through immediately. "Dorothy. Have you seen Facebook this morning?" she demanded without preamble. "You're practically trending in Seattle academic circles." Elaine can't stop laughing about the photo of Tara's comment under the university post, "So proud of my mother-in-law and her distinguished friend." She's never called me her mother-in-law before, I noted dryly. Usually I'm just James' mother. "Amazing what a little perspective can do," Dorothy chuckled. "So Dish, how was it?" I spent the next half hour recounting the evening, the conversations, the dancing, Harold's invitation to dinner. "I'm happy for you," Dorothy said sincerely. "Not because you showed up, Tara, though I won't pretend that isn't satisfying, but because you look alive again, Araceli. That's what matters." Sunday dinner at James and Tara's came with a startling change in atmosphere. Tara greeted me with an actual hug, ushering me into their home, as if I were an honored guest rather than an obligation. "That dress you wore was stunning," she gushed, taking my coat. "Where did you find it?" "The designer work is exquisite." I smiled politely, naming the store without elaboration. James looked between us with slightly bewildered happiness, clearly pleased at the change but uncertain of its cause. Throughout dinner, Tara was unrecognizably solicitous, asking about my volunteer work, offering second helpings, even requesting my opinion on their kitchen renovation plans. When James stepped outside to take a work call, she leaned forward confidentially. "So Harold Friedman," she began, her tone casual, yet intent. "Has quite respected in business circles. How long have you two been reconnecting?" "Not long," I replied, keeping my answer deliberately vague. "We've known each other since college, of course." "Of course," she echoed. I noticed several of my LinkedIn connections commenting on the university photos. Apparently, he just finished consulting with Amazon on their economic impact initiatives. And there it was, the real reason for her sudden interest. Harold represented potential networking opportunities, connections to people who could advance her career. I was simply the unexpected conduit. Harold doesn't discuss his consulting work much, I said lightly. He prefers talking about books, music, travel, personal interests. Tara nodded quickly. Naturally. A mind like his needs creative outlets. You know we should have you both over for dinner sometime. James would love to get to know him better, I'm sure. I smiled noncommittally, neither agreeing nor refusing. The sudden reversal was almost dizzying, from makeup can't work miracles at your age to dinner invitations in less than a week. The following month brought a transformation in my life. Harold and I began seeing each other regularly: museums, concerts, quiet dinners where we talked for hours. We enjoyed a comfortable intimacy, neither rushing nor avoiding the natural progression of our relationship. He respected my occasional need for solitude, understanding that after years of being on my own, adjustment took time. With Harold came an expanded social circle. I met his colleagues, his daughter, and her family, his longtime friends. To my delight, they welcomed me warmly, many expressing how happy they were to see Harold finding joy again after his wife's passing. My own friends were supportive, especially Dorothy, who took full credit for the reconnection. "Best matchmaking of my career," she declared proudly. Meanwhile, Tara's behavior continued its dramatic shift. She called occasionally with transparent excuses to check in, mentioned professional events she thought might interest Harold, and made efforts to establish herself as supportive and caring. James noticed the change, commenting on it during a rare lunch, just the two of us. "Tara's really warmed up to you lately, Mom. She's always asking what you might like for dinner when you visit, or if we should consider your schedule when making plans." I simply smiled. People evolve, I suppose. The real test came at a backyard barbecue James and Tara hosted for some friends and colleagues. Harold accompanied me, fitting in effortlessly with his natural charm and genuine interest in others. I watched with amusement as Tara maneuvered to speak with him about a business conference where he would be presenting. When Harold excused himself to help James with the grill, Tara sidled up to me, wine glass in hand. "Harold's certainly distinguished for his age," she commented. "Though don't you sometimes worry about, well, age, appropriate relationships? I mean, people do talk." The familiar condescension had returned, though better disguised. The implication was clear: I should be grateful for Harold's attention, rather than confident in it. 5 weeks ago, I would have absorbed the barb in silence, perhaps even internalized it, but the woman who had walked out of that restaurant rather than accept disrespect was growing stronger every day. "Tara," I said quietly, but firmly, "I've spent years accepting your criticism and thinly veiled insults to keep peace in this family. That ends today. I'm no longer interested in your opinions about my appearance, my relationships, or my choices. If you can't speak to me with basic respect, I'd prefer you don't speak to me at all." Her face registered shock, then quick calculation as she glanced around to see if anyone had overheard. "I was just making conversation," she began defensively. "No, you were doing what you've always done, attempting to diminish me to make yourself feel superior. It won't work anymore." James approached, catching the end of our exchange. His expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization as he looked between us. "Is everything okay?" he asked cautiously. "It's fine," I assured him. "Tara and I were just clarifying some boundaries." The rest of the afternoon passed in awkward politeness, Tara uncharacteristically subdued. As Harold and I prepared to leave, James walked us to the car. "Mom," he said quietly, "has Tara been? Has she been unkind to you all this time?" The question contained so much: his growing awareness, his discomfort, his guilt at potentially having missed or ignored something important. I touched his cheek gently. "We can talk about it another time, I promised. Today is for celebrating." Later that week, James called and asked to meet for coffee, just the two of us. Over lattes at our old favorite cafe, he asked direct questions and actually listened to my answers. I was careful to be truthful without vilifying. Tara, she was still his wife, and marriages were complicated. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his expression troubled. "I should have noticed. I should have said something." Yes, I agreed, neither absolving nor condemning him. "But we're here now. That's what matters." "What changed?" he asked. "You seem so different lately. More like you used to be when Dad was alive." I considered the question seriously. I remembered that I deserved basic respect and kindness, not because I'm your mother or Harold's companion or anyone's anything, but because I'm a person of value in my own right. James nodded slowly. "You've always been that, Mom. Always." 6 months later, James and Tara celebrated their anniversary with a garden party at their home. Harold and I arrived together, now established as a couple in the eyes of family and friends. The changes in those months had been subtle but significant. Tara maintained a careful politeness toward me, no longer attempting barbed comments or condescension. James had become more attentive, making time for regular visits and calls, without Tara's orchestration. The party was elegant, but comfortable, with catered food, and a small jazz band playing in the corner of their landscaped yard. I wore a simple, but stylish sundress, my hair styled naturally, minimal makeup enhancing rather than masking my features. At 68, I had stopped apologizing for my age, and instead embraced the freedom and wisdom it brought. Several of Tara's colleagues approached me during the party, making connections through Harold or mentioning the university gala photos. I engaged pleasantly, but without the desperate need for approval that had once characterized my social interactions. At one point, I found myself alone with Tara near the drink table. She looked striking in an expensive dress, every detail of her appearance carefully curated. "The party is lovely," I offered genuinely. "You've done a beautiful job with everything." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "Harold seems to be enjoying himself. Hes talking economics with my boss. They're quite impressed with him." "Harold does tend to make an impression," I agreed. Tara fingered her glass nervously before speaking again. "You know, most men his age would prefer someone younger. You should consider yourself lucky." There it was, one last attempt to establish hierarchy, to position herself as superior, despite all that had changed. The old Araceli might have flinched or withdrawn. The woman I had reclaimed merely smiled. "Lucky isn't the word I'd choose," I replied evenly. "Discerning, perhaps, on both our parts." Before she could respond, James joined us, placing a protective arm around my shoulders. Whether head overheard or simply sensed the tension, his presence made a clear statement about where he stood. "Mom, Harold was asking for you. Something about a potential trip to the Galapagos you've been discussing." As I moved away, I caught a glimpse of James, speaking quietly but firmly to Tara. Their body language told me he was no longer avoiding conflict at my expense, a small but meaningful shift in our family dynamic. The following year brought many changes. Harold and I continued our relationship at our own pace, neither rushing nor avoiding deeper commitment. We traveled together to places I'd always wanted to see: the autumn foliage in Vermont, the art museums of Chicago, the coastal villages of Oregon. At our age, we understood the precious nature of time and chose to fill it with experiences and connections that mattered. My relationship with James strengthened as he made consistent effort to rebuild what had been damaged. We established new traditions: Sunday morning walks, followed by brunch at a local cafe, just the two of us. During these walks, we talked about everything from his work challenges to my memories of his childhood, developing the kind of adult parent-child relationship I had always hoped for. Tara and I reached a détente of sorts. She had finally understood that her behavior had consequences, that James would no longer tolerate disrespect toward me, and that her professional aspirations were not served by antagonizing someone with Harold's connections. Her politeness might have been strategic rather than genuine, but it allowed for peaceful family gatherings, which was all I really wanted. On my 69th birthday, Harold organized a surprise celebration at a waterfront restaurant. Friends from every chapter of my life filled the room: Dorothy and my book club ladies, former teaching colleagues, volunteers from the library program, even several former students who had kept in touch over the years. James had helped coordinate everything, ensuring people from my past and present could celebrate together. As Harold led me onto the dance floor for our first dance, I caught sight of my reflection in the restaurant's windows. The woman looking back at me stood tall, moved gracefully, smiled genuinely. She looked her age and was beautiful because of it, not despite it. "A penny for your thoughts," Harold murmured as we swayed to the music. Thinking about journeys," I replied. "How sometimes the most important ones happen inside us, not across distances." He nodded understanding, his arms secure around me. "You've had quite a journey this past year." "We all have our moments of reckoning," I said. "Mine came with a lipstick and a cruel comment. But I'm grateful for it now. Without that moment, I might never have found my way back to myself, or to you." Later that evening, surrounded by people who truly valued me, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. I'd learned that respect must be mutual, even in family. That boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for healthy relationships. That it's never too late to reclaim your voice, your joy, your sense of self-worth. Most importantly, I'd learned that standing up for yourself doesn't end relationships that matter. It transforms them into something more authentic, more balanced, more life-giving. As I watched James laughing with Harold, Tara engaged in polite conversation with Dorothy, friends from different parts of my life, connecting with each other, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path had been difficult at times, painful even, but it had led to this moment of wholeness I'd never have experienced if I'd continued to accept the unacceptable. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who should have treated you better? I hope my story gives you courage to remember your worth is not determined by others' opinions. Life is too precious and too short to spend it shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. Your beauty, your wisdom, your value, these things are inherent, not granted by anyone else's approval. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more life lessons from someone who's learned them the hard way. Share in the comments a time when you had to reclaim your power. I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to stand tall in your truth. Thank you for listening to my story today.